Hi friends, it's Mrs. Pierce back again for another week of e-learning. This week we are going to be working on central message or theme as we are reading text this week. So we're actually switching over and we're going to be reading about folk tales, fairy tales, fables, myths, and we're going to be identifying the central message or the theme. So let's take a look at our LEQ. How can I identify the central message using key details from the text? So let's talk about that word, central message. Central message is the moral or the lesson learned in a story. So it's the lesson learned. So in our fairy tales or our folk tales, fairy tales, myths, our characters will oftentimes learn something. Like, for example, 2 wrongs don't make a right, treat others the way you want to be treated, don't judge a book by its cover, work smarter, not harder. Those are all lessons that are important in life, and a lot of times we learn these life lessons from fairy tales, folk tales, myths, and these fables. So these characters are going to be facing some sort of problem, usually in the story, or some dilemma that they're going to be facing, and so they're going to be learning something from those problems or from these experiences that they have. So we as a reader need to be able to read and identify the central message or the theme as we see it right here, the moral. Because we know that it's really good to have good morals, and we can learn some of those by reading these stories. So we're going to be reading the text, and we're also going to be using these key details. And remember, the key details are the proof. We always want to find proof. We don't want to just say that this is the central message or this is the theme. We need to be able to prove it. So as we're reading, we're going to be looking for those details. So for example, we're going to be asking ourselves, okay, was an important life lesson taught? What did the main characters learn? And how did the characters grow or change? Because sometimes the lesson is in how the character changed. Maybe at the beginning of the story they were acting a certain way, and maybe it wasn't a nice way, and then by the end of the story maybe they learned something and they changed. So we can identify the central message based off the character's actions. Okay, and so what we're going to be talking about here, this is what theme is. A theme is a message or a lesson the author wants the reader to know or learn. The theme is often inferred. That means if something is inferred, we have to take what we already know and make a good prediction as to what we think the author's message is, because it will not come out and directly state it. It says right here, a theme is not directly stated in the text. We have to infer, okay? Theme is also universal. That means it applies to everyone in the story, okay? It can apply to anybody in life as well. Theme is also expressed as a sentence or a statement. So we're not going to be just using maybe one word to express the theme or to identify the theme. It's not a topic, it's a statement, okay? So some examples of themes I just read at the beginning are right here in this little bubble here, 2 wrongs don't make a right. That means if somebody does something bad to you, you shouldn't do something bad back, because that doesn't make it right. Treat others the way you want to be treated. We call that the golden rule. Don't judge a book by its cover. That means don't judge people by the way that they look on the outside. We want to dig deep and get to know what they are like on the inside. One thing that we always say is work smarter, not harder. That is a good lesson also to learn. All right, so this week we're going to be reading some Aesop fables, and the first fable that we're going to take a look at is called The City Mouse and the Country Mouse. So every time I get a text, I want to make sure I'm previewing it. So I need to read the title, and I also need to see if there are any headings or subheadings. However, this is fiction. This is literature, so there's really probably not going to be those types of text features, but there might be some pictures. And as I can see right here on this page, there is an illustration, and it looks like I see 2 mice, and then underneath it, there even has a little text box there, caption that goes with it, and it tells me my moral of the story. which is awesome. So now I know what the moral of the story is. So all I need to do is I need to find the details that support it. So it says right here, the moral, it is better to live simply in safety than to live in luxury and fear. So let's talk about that word luxury. When I think of the word luxury, I think of like the most expensive designer, um, fancy houses. So whenever, so I want to put fancy, expensive. So it's telling me it's better to live simply, and that sounds like the word simple, and I know that simple is not having a lot. It's better to live simply and in safety than to live in luxury and fear. So I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to think that maybe one of these mice lives in has a simple life, and maybe one of these mice has a luxurious life, but they might live in fear. So as I'm reading, I'm going to be looking for details that support that. So I'm going to go ahead and write down our central message right here. It is better to live simply in safety than to live in luxury and fear. All right. So as I'm reading, I want to be asking myself, okay, are there any details that support that central message or that moral of the story? So let's go ahead and start reading from the beginning. It says, the poor country mouse decided to take a journey and visit his rich cousin in the city. The country mouse was surprised at how busy and crowded the city was. He had never seen so many other mice living in one place. Okay, so I just read a chunk, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask myself, all right, is there any detail in there that talks about maybe why it would be better to live a simple life and feel safe than to live a fancy or an expensive life and live in fear? And I don't really see too many details in here other than where it talks about how the country mouse was the poor mouse and the city mouse was his rich cousin. Okay, and it says that the country mouse was surprised because it was so busy. He never seen anything like that because he lived in the country. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the second paragraph right here. It says, the city mouse decided to show his country cousin around his fancy home. Everything was of the finest quality, including the delicious foods stored on the kitchen pantry shelves. Okay, so I just stopped and read another paragraph, so I want to stop and I want to ask myself, okay, is there anything in there that tells me that proves our central message that it's better to live simply than to live a life of luxury? And really, there's no detail there that's telling me that. I see that the city mouse had a lot of fine things, a lot of good foods. It says everything was made of the finest quality. So that's just telling me that he just had a really fancy life. So let's go ahead and look at the next paragraph. It says, look at all of this food, exclaimed the astonished country mouse. You must eat very well. Well, yes, whispered the city mouse as he looked around nervously. Oh man, I wonder why he's nervous. But you must lower your voice. There is a cat that guards the pantry and he is always on the prowl for mice. Uh-oh. So that right there tells me that the city mouse, he's nervous. So when you're feeling nervous and you want to keep a low voice because you don't want this cat to come and get all of your food, do you think he feels safe? So if you're feeling nervous because you're always worried about a cat coming, do you think that the city mouse feels safe? Probably not. So that is probably one of my details that I need to add into my graphic organizer. So I'm over here as my first detail. I'm going to say the country mouse was nervous because of the cat. All right. So that would make me nervous too, being a mouse and have a cat come around and try to take my food. Whew. All right, so let's keep on reading. It says in the next paragraph, the country mouse decided he'd had his fill of city life. Okay, so he says right there, I don't think that this is a life for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that to my paragraph my detail, my graphic organizer, because I feel like that's important. So he had had his fill of the city life. So the country mouse did not like the city life. He had had his fill. He had had enough. He much preferred the quiet aloneness of his country life to the crowded, dangerous city. So he thanked his cousin for the visit and returned to his humble home. So another word for humble, if we remember what it said at the beginning of our story of what the country mouse's life was like, it said he lived a simple life. So humble is another word for simple, not having very many things. So the country mouse preferred his humble life because he didn't like that the city mouse was living in fear. He was nervous. He was fearful of the cats. So the lesson that our country mouse learned was that, you know what, even though my cousin that lived in the city had all of this the finest quality of things, had this amazing, delicious food, had this gorgeous home, it's still not worth it because he was living in fear. So it was much better for this country mouse to live with less, but to feel safe. So as you guys are reading, and as you guys are reading these Aesop fables this week, I want you thinking about what the characters learn. Now, a lot of times in these fables that we're reading, it's going to tell you the moral, which is awesome. All you have to do is go and find the details that support it. Okay, so you guys give it a try. The first one that you guys are going to be reading this week is called The Crow and the Pitcher. So as you are reading, you're going to be, you can get a piece of paper like I have right here, and you can fill out just detail, and then the central message. And then what you guys are going to do is you're going to go into that discussion, and you're just going to type your notes in. And I have it set up for you just like it needs to be done in the discussion box. All right? And feel free, remember, if you have any questions, reach out. I know you guys can do it. Have fun.